After the High Holy Days last year, many congregants shared how nice it was, how much they enjoyed attending services from their homes, how pleasant it was to participate in worship, to pray from their living room couch. When I suggested that we could take the pews out of the sanctuary and put couches and lazy boys in here instead, the response inevitably was, well, Rabbi, we really enjoyed wearing sweatpants, watching with our pets on our laps, enjoying a cup of coffee or a glass of wine after a long year, while we prayed, of course. Throughout the pandemic, our living rooms, our dining rooms, our offices, and even our vehicles have become sanctuaries, sacred spaces as we have gathered for worship online, attended bar and bat mitzvah ceremonies using computers and mobile devices, retreating from the chaos and the uncertainty that surrounds us. In our tradition, any space can become a sanctuary, a sacred space. I'm reminded of a reading by Ellen Steinbaum in our Shabbat prayer books. Our ancestors built the synagogue as a visible presence of God's presence in their midst. Throughout our long history and our endless wanderings, it has endured. A beacon of truth, love, and justice for all humanity. Its presence guided our ancestors to lives of righteousness, weariness, doubt, the flaws and fears within our human hearts. These drop away at the door. Wherever you are watching, wherever you are participating in our worship, becomes sacred space because of the intention that we bring into that space. We intentionally do not call this virtual worship because virtual implies that something is not complete. We are not able to gather as we have in years past, and still our worship is authentic. We are gathered together with the shared intent of celebrating the Jewish New Year and to affirm the sacredness of our lives. With that intent, the space that each of us occupies becomes a sanctuary and a sacred space. The weariness, doubt, and fear within our human hearts may not quickly dissipate or drop away at the door. Indeed, festering fears compete to dominate our lives. Fear of COVID and climate change, fear of anti-Semitism from the right and from the left, fear of socialism and Trumpism. Our tradition refers to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur collectively as Yamim Noraim, the days of fear, as I shared last night. The classical understanding reflected in our prayers is that Rosh Hashanah is Yom Hadin, a day of judgment. We stand in judgment before God, as we just heard in the words of the Unatan Tokef prayer. The righteous will be inscribed in the book of life for a good year. We read, the Rosh Hashanah yikatevun Yom Tzom Kippur yechatemun. On Rosh Hashanah it is written, on Yom Kippur it is sealed, who will live and who will die. We are filled with fear of heaven and reminded that we have the power to change our lives, that through repentance, prayer, and charity, we can transcend the harshness of the divine decree. Yirah, the Hebrew word that means fear, can also mean awe. These are days of fear, and these are days of awe. These words are connected in English as well. The Oxford English Dictionary defines awe as a feeling of reverential respect mixed with wonder or fear. Our challenge, this year especially, is to experience awe, to transcend the imminent fears that surround us and may inhibit our fear of heaven, leaving us unable to fathom what may be. The Torah offers insight. In the book of Genesis, our patriarch Jacob deceived his father and received a blessing intended for his brother Esau. Esau was filled with murderous rage, and Jacob fled. And after he stopped for the night, Jacob dreams of a ladder to the sky, with divine messengers climbing and descending. God appears and reiterates promises made to Abraham and Isaac that Jacob and his countless descendants will one day return safely and inhabit the promised land. When Jacob awoke, he declared one of my favorite lines in Torah. Achein yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. Surely God was in this place, and I did not know it. Jacob was able to transcend his imminent fears, an attack by Esau. He left the comfort and familiarity of home for a destination unknown. And in transcending his fears, he was able to experience awe in God's presence. The Torah explains that Jacob took the rock he used as a pillow and anointed it with oil. He renamed the place Beit El, house of God in Hebrew, written as Bethel in English, and he continued on his journey. And I wonder, if Jacob could experience awe amidst his fear in Bethel, can we experience awe amidst our fear in Ridgefield, in South Salem, in Reading? I'm reminded of another experience that I have shared before from when I was studying to be a rabbi living in Cincinnati, Ohio. I lived in an apartment in a row of renovated, gentrified houses on the border of a not-so-nice neighborhood. My wife might tell you that the house was not on the border, but that it was actually in the not-so-nice neighborhood. I generally felt safe, but one evening as I arrived home and stepped out of my car, a haggard-looking young man stumbled down the sidewalk. I felt a little threatened and tensed up instinctively, but this was something that happened fairly frequently. "Hey," he said to me. I tensed up even more. Usually people on the sidewalk just kept walking. I tried not to pay attention. "Hey man, I'm talking to you." I paused, debating whether I should jump back in my car. "Hey man, can you help me?" Every so often, someone walking by would ask for money, and I prepared my standard "sorry, I don't have any cash on me" response. "Hey man, I just got jumped and had to run away." I looked up, and when he was closer, I could see that he was badly bruised, with blood on his face and shirt. When I offered to call the police, he said, "Look, I just need a pair of shoes to get home. I can't walk far barefoot, and they won't let me on the bus without shoes." So I removed the shoes from my feet and handed them to him. And as I walked barefoot along the pavement and up the stairs to my apartment, and every day after that, When I returned home, 2 lines of Torah echoed in my mind. The first were God's words to Moses, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground." And the second were these words of Jacob, "Surely God was in this place, and I did not know it." Fear may paralyze us, leave us unable to imagine what can be, unable to transcend the dark and frightening moments of life. Fear leads us to live in isolation, dreading a highly contagious pathogen we cannot see or touch, afraid to see the people that we love, struggling to fathom our future. In 1946, renowned psychotherapist, philosopher, and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl detailed his experiences in several Nazi camps, including Auschwitz and man's search for meaning. I spoke about Viktor Frankl last night. We had a reading written by Frankl earlier in our service this morning. And though our current fears are great and should not be minimized, the horrors of the Holocaust are beyond comparison. The inhumanity and struggle for existence that Frankl lived and witnessed puts our own experiences into perspective. There's a lot we can learn from the experience of Frankl and many Holocaust survivors. Frankl explained that after the initial shock of how their lives had changed and the fears of their captors had subsided, prisoners focused on survival. They outwardly displayed apathy to their surroundings and the horrors they encountered. Inwardly, prisoners retreated from their terrible surroundings to a life of inner riches and spiritual freedom. They found a refuge from the emptiness, the desolation, and spiritual poverty, and they experienced the beauty of art and nature as never before. Frankl recalled, "One evening when we were already resting on the floor of our hut, dead tired, soup bowls in hand, a fellow prisoner rushed in and asked us to run out to the assembly grounds and see the wonderful sunset. Standing outside, we saw sinister clouds in the west, and the whole sky alive with clouds of ever-changing shapes and colors, from steel blue to blood red. The desolate gray mud huts provided a sharp contrast, while the puddles on the muddy ground reflected the glowing sky. Then, after minutes of moving silence, one prisoner said to another, 'How beautiful the world could be.'" Our fears and our concerns are real. The shock of how our lives have changed, how our world has changed during COVID, some of that initial shock may have subsided. For the most part, apathy has not set in. We may still experience frustration when we encounter someone unmasked where they should be wearing a mask. We still fear new variants or encounters with people who are unvaccinated. But we also have an opportunity now, today, on Rosh Hashanah, to pause and look up, to replace the fear that presses us down with a transcendent sense of awe. We have the power to look up and see the sunset, to recognize that we can have a transcendent experience in every room in Ridgefield, in living rooms in Lewisboro, dining rooms in Danbury, couches on Cape Cod, kitchens in Katona. In every place where we are gathered, we can look up, filled with awe, and proclaim, "Surely God is in this place." May we find the strength and the courage to experience awe and transcend our fears. To appreciate that every place can become a sacred space. L'shana tova tikatevu. May we all be inscribed for a good year. Amen.